3 out of 4 young black men can expect to serve time in prison. 3 out of 4 young black men can expect to serve time in prison. Even though that surveys show white youth are more likely to commit drug crimes than people of color, I am the one behind bars. And even though that studies show all races use and sell drugs at almost identical rates, I am the one that is charged. And you tell me that race is not the charge for these racially charged statistics, and that the U.S. penile population explosion from 300,000 to 2 million with drug convictions is just bullshit. And I must have misinterpreted it. How is this? That the United States of America, land of the free, has the highest incarceration rate in the world, and that most of its prisons are made up of the fathers of these little brown boys and these little brown girls, because 3 out of 4 young black men can expect to serve time in prison. 3 out of 4 young black men can expect to serve time in prison. And the definition of expecting is looking forward to, anticipating, and preparing for it. So even before the manifestation of his birth, he is preparing to be put in handcuffs. So based off these presuppositions, we teach that nigga to man up. Man up. Because depending on where you are and the color of your skin, you are 25 times greater to have your freedom stripped away from you than a white man. And Ronald Reagan, you the real MVP. You put the war on drugs on the map. You had the world thinking racial disparities, economic injustice, segregation, and poverty wasn't the problem, but rather it was cocaine and crack. And I find it suspiciously funny that as drug crime was shifting downward, the uprising of this war was declared, and we avoid the open discussions of how race correlates with our rates and give these sorry speeches like, under no circumstances, black nor white, will the gavel be spared. Yeah, I call bullshit. Because 3 out of 4 young black men can expect to serve time in prison. 3 out of 4 young black men can expect to serve time in prison. Another form of social control, because for as long as your rights are stripped away from you and result of your criminal record, you are a slave. So it's yes sirs and yes ma'ams to massa, because even after jail you are on probation and more likely to go back, so it's yes massa, I'll behave. And even after you have served your time enslaved behind these plague bars, you are a felon. You are permanently, publicly pushed aside as a second-class citizen. Exclusion. Subject to legal discrimination, you are a nigga. Oh, I mean a felon. Because it is no longer socially permissible to use the color of my skin or the amount of my melanin as a reason for housing discrimination and voting intimidation, lack of employment confirmation, and these stereotypical accusations. So, even though I was sentenced to 5 years on a drug charge, I am now sentenced to life of mainstream social condemnation. And you tell me I'm just being paranoid, and that the world has shifted into this blissful, colorblind state of being, and that Texas, starting from just 1 private prison to 38 private prisons over a decade, is just a theoretical assumption based off perception, and racism is me just make-believing. 80%. 80% of drug charges in the 1990s was 80% of drug arrests in the 1990s was for marijuana possessions. Now you got these white men on reality shows making billions in 2015 with the world publicly applauding for their marijuana distribution successes and their personal wage concessions from the newly legalized drug dealing professions. However, 3 out of 4 young black men can expect to serve time in prison. 3 out of 4 young black men can expect to serve time in prison. 5 times as many whites use drugs than blacks. Yet blacks are sent to prison on drug charges 10 times the rate of a white person. And blacks serve virtually just as much time for drug crimes for 58 months than whites do for violent crimes for 61 months. And you wonder why the black community continues to worsen. These brown men are in prison. They must have deserved it for a reason, right? Even though most drug offenders have no history of violence or significant selling activity, they were just kind of charged with drug possession while not being white. And we can assume that because 14 million whites versus 2.6 million blacks admit to using illicit drugs and make up the vast majority of drug dealers, that they are more likely to commit drug crimes. Yet, black men are sent to prison on drug charges at a rate that is 13 times higher that no white man has to climb. 3 out of 4 young black men can expect to serve time in prison. 3 out of 4 young black men can expect to serve time in prison. And you think it's just a coincidence and that blacks are just more likely to be criminals. But you should never argue with a fool, and you're just speaking out of ignorance. The war on drugs and the correlation of black men in prison is no coincidence. Zero tolerance in the school's negative effect on black children, leading them from the school to the tunnel to prison, is no incident. If 16-year-old Tyrone Johnson would or could articulate his problems instead of trying to be a thug, got a real job and lived a normal life instead of always trying to sell drugs. Meanwhile, Billy White's selling drugs in his suburban neighborhood. He gets caught with a bag of X at his high school. Principal calls his parents, calls his therapist, then calls the police, slaps the cuffs on his wrist, but gives him the speech like boys will be boys and I was once his age too. Tyrone was just accused of trying to be a thug and was sentenced to 2.5 years. Billy just received 450 community service hours and accused of being an immature boy. And you expect me to believe that the criminal justice system is non-discriminatory and fair? I was asleep, but now I'm awakened because I was mistaken like the rest of us and led to believe that the unfortunate consequences of poverty, lack of education, and just the criminal mindsets of blacks was the reason why they put our men in cuffs. 3 out of 4 young black men can expect to serve time in prison. 3 out of 4 young black men can expect to serve time in prison. I'm not debating. I'm just stating facts that this new era of colorblindness has left you blinded from reality that they're still white and you're still black. Racial indifference is obsolete when racial prejudices still prevail and that the color of my skin either makes me a target or makes me a victim and plays a huge role in whether I'm kept in or out of jail. But I guess I'm the idiot, right? Because you say, isn't this what you people wanted, to not be seen as black? I didn't know that being seen as black was such a burden, or is it just the hideous response that the people of my skin color attracts? 3 out of 4 young black men can expect to serve time in prison. 3 out of 4 young black men can expect to serve time in prison. And I'm not supposed to be mad. I'm not supposed to be mad. I'm supposed to raise my 4 sons, protect them and love them, but expect, prepare, and anticipate 3 of them to be hauled away in the back of a police cab. 3 out of 4 young black men can expect to serve time in prison. 3 of you 4 young black men can expect, anticipate, prepare, and look forward to serving time in prison.